Our guest today has a solution that can help attorneys take their office from chaos to clear.
It doesn't matter if they're lawyers, though. My processes are processes that work in offices.
I don't run a law firm, but I want to hear more.
There's no such thing as work-life balance.
Everything except the law will begin after a brief word from Answering Legal. Visit answeringlegal.com to learn more about our virtual receptionist team.
I would absolutely, without question, recommend Answering Legal to every law firm. Not one law firm, but every law firm out there. I've gotten so much business as a result of hiring them. I knew that we were getting a lot of calls after hours. So I needed a company to answer those phone calls live and to get the name, number, because that's key information. All my cases are called back. Answering Legal is the best.
Hi, everybody. Welcome back to Answering Legal's Everything Except the Law podcast. I'm your host, Taryn Winter-Brill. Just call me TWB. Now, if this is your first time tuning in, this is the podcast where we share expert advice on all of the parts of running a law firm that attorneys weren't exactly trained for back in law school. Now, if you're a lawyer in 2024, you know what it's like to be overwhelmed by incoming information. Trying to keep track of messages and emails can create a ton of stress in your day. Fortunately, our guest today has a solution that can help attorneys get organized and take their office from chaos to clear. We love that. Andrea Cannavina joins me now. Andrea, it's great to see you. Thanks so much for being here.
Oh my goodness. Thank you so much for having me. It's
a shout out to a fellow Long Islander. We love that as well. I'm from Melville. You grew up in Hicksville, yes?
Yes. Actually, I am Canadian, but moved here when I was like in middle schoolish. I did graduate from Glen Cove High School, but I'm now currently
in Exit 39, Glen Cove Boulevard. All right. Moving on, I digress. Before we get into today's discussion, just introduce yourself, Andrea. Tell us a little bit about your background. You told us where you're from, but your experience working with lawyers over the years.
Oh my goodness. So it goes back to my brick and mortar days. Really, it was one of the first jobs that I had. And then in real life, in traditional law firm settings, I like to say in the environment itself, I went from corporate to millionaire boutique. There's just I ran the gamut, and I did a couple of specialties. So I was actually the person that was in the office running the stuff. And as I moved into it, was literally as everything went from paper, and we started with personal computers. So that was really as the transition. So I know a little bit before. I used to call myself the analog assistant, but that seems a little ancient. So I don't like to say that one so much anymore. So I've been working with lawyers a very long time. When I had my second child and daycare was just going to be out of reach, decided to try to do the transition to digital. The year was 2001. It was first myself, then myself and teams of people. It's the company I created, Legal Typist. Fast forward over 8,000 days, still doing the day-to-day work of law firms, some of them even that long, some of them from just last week. So it's really been a pleasure being the CEO of Legal Typist, because that's what helped me understand that if I was the one doing the day-to-day work, I wasn't going to be able to enjoy life. And if I wasn't organized, I wasn't going to be able to do anything. So it's really part of the journey for myself. And that's where DAFT first was created. It wasn't for lawyers. It was for myself, and it was never meant to be shared. It was just for myself, but that's part of the story. So, good.
A little teaser. We love it. Right. DAFT is the organization system you created, which we're going to get to in a moment. But I just want to pull back for a little bit. You mentioned 8,000 days and counting plus
23 years of doing the work of law firms, scalable since 2000.
Incredible. I've never had anyone put it into days. But before we get into your specialty and your specific lane in the business, someone with your breadth of experience, it's fascinating to talk to you. You've really seen the change and run the gamut of this transformation. How do you put it into words, right? I mean, when you have new lawyers coming into the workforce, right? This is all they know. This is their normal, right? But the digital transformation you've seen, is it something you could have ever envisioned, expected? Was this, tell us how you experienced it all.
How I experienced it was email. It was really happened. And as somebody who was, I call it the premier virtual assistant service to the legal industry and lawyers talk, all I needed was one thing to fall through the cracks. And my reputation and my company's reputation would be, lawyers, they love to say, bad news travels fast. I don't just want to say that about lawyers. But especially if you do a really bad faux pas in legal that you don't understand what you're doing and you clearly display that, which apparently I'm one of the very few people that reads every terms of service because there's some pretty wonky terms in some of those services that you guys are agreeing to out there in terms of what you're using to run your practice. So always, that's one of my first things, always read the terms of service and at least be aware of what you're agreeing to with regard to that. But so security first. But anyway, so I have a very unique perspective. I worked with lawyers on the ground. I built a digital business that was able to scale to provide the administrative, secretarial, data entry work of law firms. It went up to including web work, and then we dialed it back down because it just became so many different options. And at a point, you have to dial into your specialty. And our specialty is helping stressed out, well, legal type of specialty is helping stressed out people at law firms try to figure out how they're supposed to get the overflow, the after hours, the specialty, the day to day, whatever you want to call it, done. And myself, because as I said, I planned myself out of this, I really took my passion to the core, and I'm a process person. And the first process I created was draft because of email. I only shared it with a friend who was also an assistant. I scribbled it on a piece of paper quick, gave it to her, didn't see her for 6 months. She was afraid she was going to get fired. That's why I gave it to her, because email was freaking her out. And then I see her 6 months later, and she literally jumped into my arms, hugging me. And I was like, I missed you too. And she's like, no, I'm hugging you for Daft. I got a raise. I was like, then so I'm all excited for her. I'm like, wow, it works for somebody else. This is awesome. And then she goes, and I shared your note, like photocopied and gave it to everybody. She worked at a financial house, one of the big ones in the city. I was like, you did what? You took my hand scribbled note on crappy paper and you shared it with people? No. So that's why I wrote it down. The first process I wrote down, and it was basically a mishmash of all of the processes that almost worked. And then they kind of came to a fruition in like a little process salad in my head, call it that way. And out came Daft. And the really thing with it, I was close with getting things done. I was so close. And it takes a lot of time to learn a system. First, you got to read it, then you got to understand it, then you got to apply it to how you do everything. Then you got to kind of tweak it, make it, and you got to see if it's working. That's almost a year of your life right there. While you're still trying to get everything done because you're on the hamster wheel still. So you're still, okay, I'll get there. Okay, I'll get there. And then when I didn't get there, that's when I basically came up with Daft because I realized something was missing from FAT, which stands, it's a common acronym, File, Act, Guys. And what was I needed some things to just sit for a little bit, just hang out and not get filed away, not get thrown out, and I don't have to do anything with them. And what I was doing was spending an inordinate amount of whatever little creativity I had trying to rename everything to fit into one of those three. And that's when I realized I was taking far too much time on a system that was supposed to be making me more productive. The system itself was making me less productive.
It's kind of a play on words. Well, let me just take a step back because I love the anecdote about how it started, right? With your friend and kind of writing in it. Some of the greatest ideas I feel like have those very interesting real life stories and kind of creating this word salad. But before we jump into Daft, which is the program, and I want you to describe it into your own words, let's just talk about information in general, right? Because given your background and you're over 8,000 days working in the industry and you've seen it all, you might be a person to say, yes, new technology has made accessing information a lot easier. But on the flip side, it's also given attorneys a lot more to keep track of. Enter Daft, which we will talk about in a moment. But in your opinion, Andrea, how big of a problem has information overload become for attorneys trying to manage growing firms, maintenance, existing firms? Like, talk to us about it. This just, swath of information.
Take a look at any of the large industry surveys out there, and it doesn't matter what size firm you appear to be at. When you take a look at the most growing percentages of problems at firms, they're either administrative in nature or technological in nature, which I wrap both of those two things together and call them the product and the process. If the process is good and you get the right product in place, then everything is productive and profitable in the way it needs to be. But when you put a product in place and say it's a solution and it's not really providing a solution to anything, it's really only giving your people one more thing to do, one more thing to carry, one more thing to charge, one more place to log in, one more thing to and with that, technically, most of those tasks that those people are doing, all of those things and taking care of are doing, are almost always administrative in nature. Why would you be trying to force somebody to go like this to get a new client process? That to me is just unbelievably unproductive. So the technology that's out there, a lot of times it's implemented from the top down. It is not implemented with the persons having to actually process. And the more products there are, they may solve certain problems in certain workflows, or they may provide a service to certain types of firms that need it, but they're all almost all standalone, which means they're independent of each other unless you build in automations. And once you start building in automations, who's maintaining the automations? Because technology, just like everything else, upgrades and changes. So if you're not upgrading and changing and paying somebody to maintain and do all the technological stuff behind it all, now again, you're doing a drain on productivity and efficiency. So it is, I would say, one of the largest, if not the largest, drain on employee, I'm gonna say the people, and I call it bandwidth. We only have so much bandwidth in any 24-hour period. Doesn't matter how efficient you are, doesn't matter how productive you are. You can only process so much. You're a human being.
Yeah. And I mean, you talk about the transition we've experienced back in the day. It was really just a phone call, right? You had a secretary, an administrative assistant keeping a log of your messages. Now you're being hit, right, with every type of portal. I mean, it's nonstop. It's 24/7. You have email. A lot of attorneys are, communicating via text, right? Social media, you name it. So let's get into some. Go ahead.
I'm not saying just the technology that attorneys use, but when it comes to specifically accessibility, I have always been a person who has told or instructed my clients to make your technology as easy and as accessible to you and your people, aka staff, as you can. Make yourself and your person available to no one. No one. And you should never have a client be able, if you're giving out your direct dial number, oh no.
Okay.
No. Yeah. So I'm agree with that. Like, and if you're doing your own reception,
Right.
oh no. There are certain things that attorneys should be doing. And if you don't have in place the proper people, at least put in place the proper process or outsource to a service that you have, that you, of course, vet, read those terms of service, and you know what? And then, test. But it's not like, instead of you trying to figure out how to compile together 7 different technologies to remove the services of that a human being brain still needs to function, find the brains that know how to function for what service it is that you're looking for.
And you mentioned accessibility is so important. So let's kind of get into doing more with less, as you specialize in. So you mentioned the DAFT system. How would you describe it in your own words? And is it primarily used with email? Is that the main nucleus of the program?
Well, since I'm on a mission to reduce the stress at law firms for every person at them, and since I know it works on an individual level, DAFT is my passion to give away. I give it away for free at my website, AndreaCannavina.com, and you can see it in the notes because I know it's long. But just on the first page, go down to the bottom, get on my A list, and you'll get a little synopsis of the system. I apply it to email because email is the largest drain on every professional's day. So nobody was taught how to deal with email. It's not like people, and even secretaries aren't taught anymore, assistants, nobody's taught how to run the office anymore. So everybody's kind of doing the best that they can. And so this is a process that you can just trust. And in a synopsis, there's only a few things that you can do with every email message. You can either defer, act, file, toss. You can just, every email message you look at before you open it, before you read it, from the subject line, from your inbox, from your phone. I love delete. You can delete from anywhere. Just delete. When you get back to your desk, when you get back to your workspace, however you do it in your world, now you only have to deal with the ones defer, act, file, defer, act, file, defer, act, file. You put them in there, in their folders, and when your inbox is 0, we'll get to that. And when your inbox is 0, you immediately go into act. And anything that you put into act that takes less than 2 minutes, you do now. You reply, you read, you whatever. And if it's going to take more, and even while you're reading it, if it's taking more, you now slide over to your calendar, and you calendar where you're going to take however much time you now think that particular task is going to require. And you calendar it in forward. Done. That's it. Now it's from your act, you put it into your defer because it's now in a holding place for something else. And when you get your act done, all the 2 minute stuff is going to be done. Anything that takes more than 2 minutes, same thing, drag it over. Your act folder will be done.
Okay.
Now you're done. Go hang out. Go work on your focus work. You don't have to worry about your email. Your email is under control until the next time you want to draft it. The rule is you never look at your inbox without drafting.
Interesting. Okay. So it's always, it's like a roadmap, right? As soon as you open that inbox, you're just constantly kind of like a video game, like boom, 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 boom. I'm putting kind of different sections into different files. So that said, kind of tell us how you know whether or not to when you look at it, it's defer or act, right? If something can take you less than 2 minutes to do, or put it in a calendar, as you mentioned, like maybe an Outlook calendar to do it another time, how do you know then if something is a deferral task, right? If this is something that, what does defer mean versus acting and putting it in your calendar for a later date?
So any task is going to be an act, but sometimes you get something like a newsletter. Now, this is something that's a task for you to read, but this isn't something that's got a time deadline to it. It's more, I want to keep this somewhere, but if I file it, I'm not going to find it anymore. So you throw it over into the defer. And the defer is kind of a holding spot for those things that you just need to let them set for a little bit. They can't, they need to brew, but they're not so important. They're blaring out at you. You just need to know you didn't forget them. And sometimes your defer folder can get pretty big. And when I say that, you should start going through it, sorting it. You can do it sort of by name, by date, by subject, however you want to do it, and start getting rid of some of the stuff that's in there. Because 90% of it is like something, I can't deal with that right now. But it's not something that requires follow-up. So anything that's a task that requires follow-up, you're going to have an action for it. The action is either put it on my calendar to get it done, or if it takes less than 2 minutes, as yes, confirmed for lunch on Friday, now your email message goes into the file folder because now you're done for the file. That you don't need to see that anymore. It's out of basically, you're using your inbox as a way to triage your brain. Instead of it capturing your brain, you're learning to process. Email isn't a trap for you to get sucked in and have to respond. Email is a way for you to triage what you're going to do over the next 24, 48 hours. And the only way for people to do that technically in today's day and age is to have it in their calendar. And for people that have problems with that, because there's other people that have problems with that, I just actually have a new process I came up with. But
related to the calendar. Okay. So you took the words out of my mouth because I wanted you to give us some real world examples of what a defer email would be. And you mentioned a newsletter, right? Something that's not requiring immediate action. The act folder, right, are things that either, like you mentioned, replying to lunch, or something that takes longer, right? You put it in your calendar, let's say. Now, let's talk about the file and the toss part of it, right? So talk to me about that kind of overlap of the act and the file. When are you putting it in the file folder?
So file is for things that you need to keep a record of, but you don't have to act on them. So say you get a receipt from a service that you pay every month for, and you want to keep a record of all of those receipts. That's going to go in your file. You have an individual folder for every service provider, so you're not going to do that. So basically what we're doing here is Adapt helps with housekeeping as well, because at the end of every month, you will be taking everything that's in your file folder and moving it into a dated folder in your Outlook, your Gmail, whatever you use. And then anything in your sent folder for the same month's period gets thrown into that dated folder, making your file folder and your sent folder empty on day one. You do this in 30-day periods, meaning you're constantly rotating. Anything that you need a copy of is in that file. Anything that sent out, that's the one that people miss. Anything that you sent out, it's in the dated folder. And I know that some people like to do search and everything else, but there are some processes where people just remember better, feel better, and if they just know which steps to take and they take them, it's almost like a habit. It's like atomic habits. Here we come in again. It's like 31 times to do something over again. Next thing you know, it's a habit. What's a habit? Something you don't think about. Do you know why you want to put all of these kind of administrative things, and especially processing email? Processing email is administrative. You answer an email, you put that in your act, or you put that in your calendar. And when you actually go to answer that email is when it becomes a billable entry.
Yeah, exactly right.
That's why email's such the drain. And that's why DAFT I apply to this. But DAFT is really a productivity if somebody, anytime you get a request, if you think daft, ooh, can I defer this? I like to do that one because I'm a people pleaser and I used to always just say yes. And everyone's like trying to, to always do and I'm like, okay, yes, I'll fit it in and I'll do more until I realized people will just keep asking. And I'm willing to just keep giving, which I am. But now I have to do it in a little metered, a little less, in a little more cohesive way for people. And I've always shared Daft. The Daft went out public in this, that you'll see if you go to my website, in 2008. So my problem was in 2005. So I know I hate to say this. I've been doing this that long.
But email was around and information is just becoming, it's just expanding. It's on steroids, as I like to say. Let's go ahead. Sorry.
And nobody teaches it in law school or pretty much any other school because nobody knows how to deal with it. Everybody just complains about it. Well, I have a process, and that's what I'm just trying to give you my process. I'm not selling you anything. Take my process. My goal is to reduce the amount of stress, make happier offices, and stress less workflows. It has always been about reducing the stress in working in law because you get enough surprises from the courts, your adversaries, and everything.
Right.
Everything else. So
I guess I'm just trying to put myself in the shoes of a lawyer, right? I wake up, I have just a million emails, as so many do. As you're going through it, you said you do this first thing, right? You don't even read emails, you just kind of look and act, right? Kind of you're sorting, you're organizing. So what happens, Andrea, when there are, or most of the density of your inbox is act, right? And then is the goal just to be filling up an Outlook calendar for the ones that I can't tackle right then and there? I mean, because some might say that the act emails are going to take me hours, right? Given the sheer volume in someone's email. So how do you tackle it if you're someone who just has a volume that's endless?
If you're getting that many ACT emails, you're funneling a process through your inbox that probably administratively should not. You have to guard your inbox like do your direct cell phone number. Don't give it to anybody. And that's your processing. So for instance, say I use the newsletter just as an example because people have had them. But normally I would say, and I call Google and always have the Borg, but get yourself a Gmail address, and anything that is not client or specific to say the Bar Association or courts or anybody else that needs it, give out your Gmail address. Don't even put it in your inbox. When you start limiting some of the stuff that's actually going in, every email you let into that inbox, you have to process. That includes delete. Delete is at least 2 to 5 seconds of your brain. And I know it sounds little, but delete is the biggest one that we do. So if we don't put them in there to begin with, we get that much more back. Little increments, little steps, little advances, little increments in time. If being a crocheter didn't teach me anything, I got to the point of crocheting lace. If you can crochet lace and have the patience to do that, which I don't know where that one came from. That was
but it's a testament to having patience. Absolutely. Let me understand. Is this for the administrative assistant? Is this for the lawyer? Like, who is this? Are they working in tandem when you look at this in real world?
Real world?
Okay.
Yes, and yes. Usually I get hired by attorneys to help them figure out how to upgrade, where to automate, put all that kind of stuff together personally, which I've been doing since 2005. But then they share it with their assistants because the assistants come in and they see the inbox and they're like, what's this? And so they share it, and it's a way for them to work in tandem because then the assistant can start shifting the things based on what needs to be done. And that's one of really the only ways that I tell attorneys or set attorneys up when working their inbox. They like to have their assistant take care of a lot of things. And believe you me, I get it, but your inbox should not be one of those things. You should be able to at least process different things and say to your assistant, go into my ACT folder and go for any of the 2-minute stuff, the under 2-minute, anything that's confirming. You respond for me, but don't respond as me. See, once you allow somebody to start taking control of hitting send from your inbox, I start having some issues with that. So there's some, and again, these are all very legal specific, and you probably wouldn't know it if you didn't work in a law firm, but there gets to be a point where there's a time where you're speaking on behalf of your attorney. And back in the day, we used to put our initials next to a signature. You can't really do that anymore. So you have to really kind of find ways to make sure that you're not coming across to the receiver as the attorney. So that's the only thing. So there's issues that you have to deal with, but yes, they can work in tandem. I have clients that work in tandem. I have people that just share it.
That's great.
So they just share it. So
And I'm just curious, it's a fascinating process because it really can be applied to all industries, right? Not just the legal world. But so curious about the act. And when you do the act, you either do it in 2 minutes or you make it an Outlook calendar meeting, right, where you can accomplish it rather in a longer period of time. Once you accomplish it, right, then what happens to that email or that task? Is it then being tossed? Is it being filed? Or possibly both? Like, depending on, you made that phone call, right? Now you have notes. So what happens to that email that was in the act folder? You've now acted on it. And now what's the next step, Andrea?
it depends on if you want to have a record of it. If you need a record of it for any reason, you throw it into file. And then you know that you're in your notes or whatever, you spoke with so-and-so on September
Great.
17th. And then if you need to see if there's anything in there, you can actually reply to yourself or send to yourself or add to a calendar note. There's so many different ways for someone to do an addendum to an inbox entry these days. So I'm not trying to limit anyone. The beauty of Daft, and that this is one I definitely found out over the years, is people morph it. Just the way that I morphed GTD and Inbox Zero and all the rest of those things, people have morphed in color coding. I've had very colorful people do stuff. I've had people, I'm like, oh my goodness, you must have OCD
Right.
with Post-its. They're like, I don't have Post-its anymore. So it's just a process. If you follow it exactly as it's written and exactly the step-by-step instructions for 30 days, you will realize how much less stressed you are by your inbox because everything in there is handled. Even the stuff that's in defer. Even if your defer is 500 emails big, at least you know it's in there, but it's not in your inbox. Your inbox has to go down to 0. You don't have to do it all. I have people that pick dates. It's the same way as when I told people when they used to go from paper to digital, pick a date. That way, from this date forward, I have to search either digitally or paper. This way, I have to in the Daft system or in that folder where I just block copied everything into and pretend it doesn't exist. But I keep it so that if I search, I can still find the stuff that's in it. But it's not my line of consciousness in my inbox.
And you mentioned, Andrea, this is my next question. You preach the key to staying organized is keeping your inbox empty at all times. A lot of people might gasp at that and say, that's bananas. How in the world? But why is that? And you've alluded to it a little bit, but why is that so important for it to be empty kind of all the time, kind of on this merry-go-round, right? Is it just the stress, as you mentioned, of the buildup, right? Because you have a job to do and the stress of the email feels like another job, the mountain that's being built.
So I think all of us are so stressed out at various times that we just don't, I call it the bandwidth. We do not have the bandwidth to deal with what's going on in our inbox. So we'll recognize it by reading it. We'll be like, can't deal with that. And then next thing you know, we have, it's like a never ending flow of missed commitments, potential opportunities. That's what I like to say. There hasn't been an inbox. Back in the day, I would go through my clients' inboxes for them and do this. And that's when I realized, no, because you need to see what you're missing. There's missed opportunities in here, things you said you would do that you didn't, things that people were supposed to give you that I know they haven't. There's all of this stuff in there. So that's why I say pick a date. People go back to a certain date, whatever they're comfortable, or what they'll do is they'll try to keep adding. They'll keep going back and back. Depending on how much, again, what I call missed opportunities, miscommunications, or confirmation, whatever they find as they're going back that they technically missed.
Yeah, but I think it's just knowing, right? Because I actually had a boss who's preached this for a while as well. He takes pride in the fact that his inbox is always at 0, and people would laugh at him and say, "How is that possible?" And he was doing his own sort of organization system, kind of in the way that you are, a little different, not with the same acronym. But just knowing that you've organized it, right? And it's there and you've addressed it, right? And the act ones, you've taken the time within 2 minutes to do what you need to do. The other ones you've put off, right? It really is. It's a mental game, right? Kind of, if I'm working on a case, but know that there's a stack of 150 emails I haven't even looked at, that's pressure, that's stress versus I'm working on a case and I know that I've been the captain, right? And I've put the team on the field. I've put offense where it needs to go defense. That's kind of how I look at it, right? It's a totally different mindset.
Right. And even if all those 2-minute things in the act folder, instead of this is another way to shift it to make it so that it works for people, because I call it clock blocking. And that's my move. Block people, block your clock, because you need time focused work. And when you want to do
Yeah.
that focused work, if you have all of those 2-minute admin things or those 2-minute things that maybe not admin, maybe it was billable, but maybe it still wasn't something, but you just block
Yeah.
them all together. Now you 10 2-minute things to do together. That's supposed to be 20 minutes. We all know it's going to be 30, 40 an hour. And that's probably enough. And then you schedule them for that block of time that you're going to be doing those at the end of your day. I don't recommend it in the beginning, either at the end of the day, at lunchtime, right after you come back from lunch, tends to be the best time to do work that you don't need
Yeah.
to be thinking about, whatever you need to do with it. But so there's ways for you to morph how your future actions are going to affect your calendar, and ways for you to organize future actions just by doing
Yeah.
deferred file tasks.
Yeah, no, absolutely. What do you think in your experience? I kind of see it as you've seen the before and you've seen the after. When you consult new firms that are asking, saying help, right? Help us help you kind of a thing. What is the biggest mistake people are still making in the year 2024, right? With all of the tools we have at our fingertips, right? Are you surprised to see like, wow, people, you're still doing this? Like, are you encountering that a lot and you can't believe people are functioning with the baseline?
Okay, so I do say that I spot these
Yeah.
disconnects, and that's what I'm a spotter of disconnects. And it sometimes it is very hard for me not. I'm a face person, so it's very hard for me to be like what's wrong with you? Like what? And whenever I do now, I kind of go blank, and I kind of tap my finger and say, "Don't jump at them." As soon as they finish talking, I do the. And can you explain to me a little bit about how you came up with the process of doing it this way? And almost invariably, I get. Um, I don't know. Somebody told me to do it,
Crickets.
and it's 35 years you've been doing it this way. Yeah. Okay. So, and that's why that's what I say. It's kind of the flow and how it is that attorneys are able to speak to me about things that they can't really talk to anybody else about. And yet, when they almost are at their most vulnerable, I try again. Sometimes it's so funny though. I have to. It's one of those things. Law firms are funny. Lawyers are funny. I enjoy their company, and I enjoy helping them see the disconnects. It doesn't matter if they're lawyers, though. My processes are processes that work in offices. And that's because I think of my unique perspective of first being only paper in a law firm, working for equity and then boutique. We're talking high maintenance people here, high maintenance people. And, doing it. And I'm not going to say it, but I was pretty,
Yeah,
I was pretty
no,
good at what
I'm
I
sure.
did. And then translating it into myself and realizing organizing oneself isn't the same as organizing somebody else. And then just happenstance sharing process I did to organize myself, seeing it worked across
Yeah.
offices. Knowledge workers. It's basically anybody dealing with email. And I have testimonials that go all the way back. I've been speaking about this since
Yeah.
2008. So I just haven't worked it in a very long time. So thank you
Yeah.
for welcoming me back.
It's people like you. You don't know what you don't know, and people might not be aware of the services that you provide. And there's actually a solution, right, to the madness that they're experiencing. That said, for someone who is looking for a system, Andrea, right, maybe a newbie and is looking to stay consistent with emails and adopt your process, what are your recommendations, right, for starting the process, right, maintaining the housekeeping of their email, right? Like, I think a big part of it is just taking that first step, taking that leap, right? Because they're seeing it as, oh gosh, another thing that I have to learn, a new process that I have to keep track of. So how do you kind of take the temperature down and say, hey, you're new at this, but we're going to keep things calm, and here are the best practices to get things going smoothly.
I'd like to start out with what I call my 5 pillars of organization. If you're going to be intentionally organized, and that stresses some people out immediately right there, which is why I kind of don't really say it. But if you're going to take a few baby steps on your journey towards intentional organization, the first thing that you have to realize, it's a choice. It's a choice. Now, once you realize it's a choice, the second thing you're going to realize is you're doing it to
Yeah.
yourself. Everything that's on your calendar, you put it there.
Right.
Every commitment that you said yes to is on there. And everything perhaps is more than one human being should be doing. So rather than think that you're not living up to, you need to start blocking that clock, figuring out your time. This is all of my different processes together. Start putting together blocks of time where you can have focused paying work where nobody interrupts you and all the rest. Have a couple of blocks in there where you do the business work, the admin work that keeps the
Mhm.
business part running, because there's 2 everybody's life there. And then you move on to your next task, or you move on to something else. But it's always, you don't know what may be in those blocks, but you have to try to figure out and guard them as hard as you can. Because if you don't, somebody will steal them from you. And then what do they pay you for? What, including your own business? You're in your own business. What do you get paid to do? Get paid to get work done? Oh, you get to pay not to spend time with your family, to not enjoy your life? Okay, now if again you're a solo, who's doing that? And why? You're doing it to yourself. I just said it to one of my solo friends this morning. I just told her, I was like, you're working for a lunatic. That lunatic is you. So now you have to dial it back. It's a choice. Now that you need a choice, now you have to move it down. Now you have to figure out what you're going to do. And that's usually where everybody falters, because it could be the process, it could be the people, it could be the products, it could be your preferences, it could be the problems you handle. There's a million different variables to how every person works. So that's where you have to try to sift it down. And that's where I specifically come in and help, attorneys and people in legal technology, and people who work at law firms, and people who work at things that help law firms. So I'm just one of those, like, I don't know. I just want to say, as a master virtual assistant who understands the tech, the web, the dynamic, the marketing, it's just, I help lawyers with their offices. Email's everybody's problem. I'm taking care of one thing at a time, and I'm hoping that it helps as many possible people as it can. And that's just really, wide down.
For sure. But obviously with a track record of proven success. I kind of picture it like tornadoes there, and you come in and kind of calm the storm, is a good way of putting it.
Yeah, I just got, and fingers crossed, I'm not going to say the date, but I've got only a few more days left to see if it becomes a registered trademark. But a recent client of mine dubbed me the law firm therapist. Yeah. After speaking with me for a little while, not only did his therapist, but also his spouse was trying to figure out what I was saying and how, because he was a different person. And again, it was all about the stress. Yeah. And
I wanted to see if you could talk a little bit about to that. I know there's a privilege and legalities and privacy involved, but some of your success stories, Andrea, you kind of mentioned it a little bit. You teased us, but I'm just so curious because other people that are thinking about adopting a new system, tell us kind of briefly experiences you've had where they went from A to Z, right? And maybe some of the challenges involved, but what ultimately did they see as the benefit, right? What's your perspective on that?
I think the number one benefit that it's kind of hard for me to say, because again, this goes all the way back to when I was being interviewed by Roger Rosen, and it's like, what do you do? How do you specifically help? You know how I specifically help? I specifically listen to each individual person, and then I effectuate the proper change. So if a staff member is coming to me, everybody is open and honest, and the only person that I will ever say anything to is the business owner. But the staff all feel very comfortable talking to me as well, because I fix it not because of the owner. I fix it because it needs fixing. And almost 90% of the time, everybody's inundated by email. I've been doing this a very long time. And if I can do one thing for any human being in any capacity whatsoever that's getting paid to do a job that is freaked out by their email, take me down. Now, the other lawyers and the other things that go on, like I said, I'm a law firm therapist, and it's just kind of because lawyers don't get to talk to anybody freely, really. They get to talk to me. And staff don't get to talk to anybody freely. And that's because I am virtual. You have to see me face to face, although my clients do all want to come meet me all the time, which is hilarious. But it's because I guess that's the one step removed for me that helps me keep my unbiased. I'm just looking at it from an outsider's perspective, and I'm not in the day-to-day of it. So that helps my perspective and helps me understand whether or not the problem is a person, a process.
Right. And it sounds like, you come in, you diagnose, but it's important to say that all offices and organizations that you help, it's not one size fits all, right? You're there to pivot, right? You've seen it all, your breadth of experience. So you're kind of pinpointing, right? The problem areas.
Not one firm I have ever spoken to, not one lawyer, not one human being works the same way.
Fascinating.
Not one. That's harsh, because then you're like, well, now what do I do? Like, I used to pick products all the time. I don't even call it tech. I call it products. I used to pick products all the time, but then other products would come on, and then I was spending so much time trying to figure out which products did what they actually said they did versus didn't. And it was like, I never grew up to be a product testing person. That wasn't what I wanted to do. So instead, that's, when I started realizing I need to focus on people and process. And
Right.
that's why
It's interesting what you said, not one person, not one firm, one lawyer, et cetera, is alike. Yet this DAF system, right, seems to be a common thread that can be applied to all these diverse areas and a variety of clients and organizations, which really says something about like
difference between process and product. A lot of times people believe we'll put another product, we'll put another tech in place. What's another tech in place? Something else that needs to be fed information. Who's going to be feeding the information? And so again, a product turns something it adds a layer, whereas a process almost always removes steps, streamlines, and that way the process itself is outside of what products are used. The process itself will tell you. If you're in Outlook, do this process in Outlook. If you're in Gmail, do this process in Gmail. There's a difference of a process. What is it? A tech agnostic. Doesn't matter what the tech is. I don't care what tech you use. I'm going to tell you how to use it better.
It's such an important distinction, rather, product versus process. That's at the heart of all of this.
Right.
A couple final quick questions, Andrea. I feel like we could talk forever on this. It's been so great. Very easy to chat with you, which is a testament to what you do, right? You come in and make people feel comfortable about the instruments you use. And I don't run a law firm, but I want to hear more. I feel like hiring you, but I don't have a lot to fix, but I like everything you've been telling us. What other areas of running a law firm can attorneys apply your system to? Can they? Is this something that's fluid in your experience?
But it can be applied to paper. That was the biggest thing when I first created it, was when everything was going digital, but you still had everything by paper. And a lot of law firms still run a lot of everything by paper. And technically I am a paper person. I do not throw the baby out with the bathwater. I just use it in a different way. So it does work for paper if you have if trays and all of the mail is incoming and everything's getting slopped on your chair. You're in a big firm environment and you're like, I need to act on this. This I don't have to deal with now. Here, this one over here needs to get filed. Put it for staff. Because if you're at a firm, you do have staff that takes care of filing. And if you're at a large firm and you don't, well, then you guys got to call me. So it can work. And of course, TOS is just the old circular file. So it can work for paper in that particular regard, so long as you don't let anything set too long in any of these. Holding could be a wicker box, could be a stand-up tray. Have everything different. It all depends on how much paper you're actually gonna be putting through it. So it transcend digital to paper, which I was very proud of. That was one of the hardest requirements for it. I'm like, it has to be simple. It has to do paper and digital. That one took me a lot of thinking. I call it. Oh, you'll love. On ruminating. Okay, so that's what I was originally going to call it, but then it would have been FATR. It was like, and then some like, no, you should have called it FART. I'm like, you really? I said, I want to be taken seriously by lawyers and the system. I'm going to teach them.
Yes, not a marketing strategy. I would.
Oh, that's hilarious, Andrea. They love that. Not the lawyers I know.
Yeah, no, glad we're dealing with Daft, but maybe in a movie, right? But actually, Andrew, before we go, you did bring up something. I'm curious, like when you pull back and you look at the whole Daft system, how much time do you suggest that each person kind of goes back to starting the process again, applying to each folder? Like what's the frequency that you're doing it throughout the day? Is that dependent upon the client, right? Or the volume? Like what determines that, the process of how often you're attacking each folder?
It's pretty much the client. I want to say I work with neurodiverse people, or I'm finding that most of the people that I connect with tend to be neurodiverse. They're admitting it to me. Yeah. It's not that, and I think because it's a process that is adaptable to people of that nature, it tends to be something that they can, it literally allows you to turn off a part of your brain. That's how I equate it to. 10% of your brain is always back here thinking, what am I forgetting? What am I forgetting?
Yeah.
Is it in my inbox? What did I not do? Half of it's all out there. When you have everything in a process, all of this over here goes, all right, now what's going on? And you're like, oh, I'm a little calmer. And that's why I'm assuming that the person that most recently called me law firm therapist, hopefully I get it. That's why that little piece of the brain that was always stressing out is gone.
Yeah, I think it's important because as it is important to switch and kind of have that disposition and that kind of relaxation
If
mode.
you don't have a trusted system in which you're placing everything, then you are literally flying by the seat of your pants. There's only two options there. So that's the choice. Okay, you have a choice, then you have to go down the road. Then you have to remember, and this one's my favorite, balance is bullshit. There's no such thing as work-life balance. If anybody's ever tried to maintain, get there, hard, maintain, life isn't. Life is about flow. So now you learn how to go with the flow. And that's what DAFT is one of the tools, helps you, it's like a hose, helps you control the flow rather than drown in the digital. And then the most important pillar, because I started this a long time ago, was every day you wake up to a fresh new day. Sometimes you're going to go into your office and it's going to look like a bomb blew off. You know what? Yeah, it's okay. Because you weren't organized with everything today. Maybe when you wake up tomorrow, or when you're over that big case, or when that big deadline is met, you can sit down, you can open up your control journal, do your little 1, 2, 3, look around and start drafting again. Right there. A way for you to realize if you fall off the wagon, you just got to pick it up. So you always have to wake to a fresh new day. Not even me, is organized in my space or in my life.
Yeah. I mean, I love everything that you just said, right? It's about being kind to yourself. Every day is going to be different, and you can't have that expectation, right? That it is. And also just the distinction you made with flow versus balance, right? Really unique. Great job. Because everyone talks about a life work balance, but it really is a flow because it's constantly in flux. It's constantly fluid. And that's definitely a better way to, I think that's kind of like an aha moment. So
my peers first start working with me, they're all looking forward to gaining more time so that they can invest it back into work. When I say all of this, I'm like, sure, okay. I usually work in 6-month blocks. Within 6 months, they have completely shifted their perspective into realizing that they can do as much work with less time. And then maybe they should be focusing their time on something else.
That was my final question. Tell us how people can connect with you, what your process is like in terms of working with you, your services, and how long the process takes, right? Is it different for every firm, I'd imagine, but how does it work, Andrea?
I work individually. I don't work on the firm level. If I'm doing anything for a firm, I'm going to do a webinar where I explain the DAF system, or they actually are going to there's 5 systems that are coming out in January. So not just DAF. So there's 4 more after that. Anybody that knows my 5 systems can figure them out and get themselves in a place where they're not feeling stressed out, which is my goal. But for now, I'm just doing the DAF. That's at AndreaCannavina.com. And I think there's a place where you can go there. It's usually a tiny URL, and it's my Twitter. It's Andrea Can Help, HELP. And there you can sign up for a free coffee talk. I speak with one 20-minute call. Everybody gets 1 20-minute call to see if I'm somebody that can help them. We get along. If we don't, if not, I generally almost always have something to recommend. A lot of legal tech companies call me with that free call and try to help get pointed in the right direction. I would much rather point somebody in the right direction than have to spend the time fixing them afterwards.
Right.
So
delegating, really important. And also, like, just firms that might not be happy with their current process in place, right? And just see if they vibe with you, right? And your tone and everything you bring. So it's so important. I love that you do that.
In larger firms, I work with managing partners. I work with the decision makers, managing partners, head of HR, the head of, sources and resources and IT, even a little in there too, because again, everyone's different, and how it is that you're going to increase it's called streamline, automate, delegate. You got to streamline the process. You got to put in automation where you possibly can. And then you have to delegate everything else that isn't the prime time focus for your money makers. We're all in this to make money. If you're even by yourself, we're all in this to make money. This isn't because I know it's a calling, and I appreciate lawyers, and that's why I love lawyers, even when other people snare at me when I say it, including other lawyers. I still love lawyers, and I think they are the champions of the people, and they work friggin' hard, and they work harder than most people ever know, because people don't even understand the constraints that they're under. Or an inordinate amount of stress, not talking about all the stupid shit that people do, or that's going on with their partners, with their whatevers. And it's a very difficult thing. And that's why I'm so happy that I am here and able to speak with, I don't care who you are. I don't care where you are. You hire me. I have a non-disclosure. You talk to me. Nothing you say to me ever goes anywhere. That's what I say to staff. I'm not going them anything, even though they pay me, but I will steer things so it works.
Yeah, no, I think you said it. At the end of the day, it's all about trust, right? Not only is it trust in your process and your system, but trust in you, right? And your temperament and everything you're bringing to the table.
Right. And trust in the improvements. And that's really where it comes down to. Lawyers are usually skeptical until I find the one disconnect that is really apparent in our first phone call. And I talk about one disconnect, I fix the one disconnect. And from that point on, the calls get generally a lot easier and a lot happier. Or what would you see today, Andrea? Well, what are we doing today, Andrea? And
It's final question. I know we're out of time, but just so curious, it's been so great chatting with you. When you look back at your career, pre-digital, post-digital, what's the one thing, or I have two questions, but what have you learned, right, that you never expected to? Kind of when you look back and look now, maybe what is the biggest surprise you've encountered, or what's the biggest thing you've learned in this transition? Kind of something that nobody else could really speak to without going through the experiences that you have.
the traditional role of marketing for service-based businesses that are not specific technologies with VC money has been unique because I'm not a vendor. If you called me a vendor, I'd basically scowl at you. I've always attended trade shows and been, again, as a product specialist so that I could recommend things to my solos and smalls. I've always gone to legal tech as media and tech show. I've been a speaker at tech show. So I've always been an educator kind of person and not a vendor, but it's a very difficult thing to get highlighted as a service provider of credit. And that's one of the reasons why I have my own private list that I share with people. And you guys are. There's and it's important that there's a trust between the service providers. So if I could say anything to the legal technology service providers out there, the traditional role that they're forcing you through is going to be very expensive, and it may not be the route that gets you the highest return on your investment.
Good to know. Just curious, right? So much to chat about. But Andrea, thank you so much for your time. It's been invaluable, insightful, and you're doing tremendous work, and it shows. And we hope that you can help a lot of other firms and lawyers out there. So thank you again.
And wants to get in touch with me, I'm Andrea Can on Twitter, have been forever, or you can go to Andrea Can Help. It's a tiny URL, set up a coffee talk, and we can take it from there.
All right. And once again, our huge thanks to Andrea. And of course, thank you to all of our listeners of our podcast. We hope you enjoyed this conversation, and we'll be back soon with another episode of Everything Except the Law. Be sure to check out previous episodes of our show. You can find them on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and the Answering Legal YouTube channel. Links to everything covered in today's conversation can be found in the description of this episode. I'm TWB. Thank you so much for joining us. We'll see you next time.